Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are diving into a deep, powerful framework today, inspired by the legendary Tony Robbins. We'll explore how changing your strategy, story, and state can be a game changer in your journey to recovery. We are aware of the reality that processed foods are everywhere, tempting us at every turn with their convenience and addictive flavors. However, behind those cravings, lies a powerful opportunity, an opportunity to transform your life. And that's where Tony Robbins' three pillars comes into play. And first up is strategy. But before we jump in, I must say hello to my partner, Jamie. How's it going?
Hi, happy to be here. Great topic, great topic. Anything with Tony Robbins's name attached to it, especially as it relates to recovery, I think is good things for folks to learn. I was exposed to Tony and his work in depth in 2014 through 2017. And it really did, it gave me an excellent foundation for my own recovery. Even though I was deep into it at that time, I still had, he gave me a foundation for personal growth that I still continue to build on.
Yeah, nice.
And this whole idea of story strategy, or excuse me, yeah, story strategy and state is really, really important because they link to each other. So I know we're starting with strategy, but truly when I think about why how they all connect, it really does. The order is story, strategy, and state. And so we'll just take a pause and talk about strategy here. Strategy is critical. It's something that I absolutely have to have in place. I'm a very strategic person, just naturally in my brain. I'm always thinking about the big picture, the long game, but that keeps me out of the weeds in a good way. But it also can help me look over some of those details that I need to pay attention to. So it's a good thing, but it can be a limiting thing sometimes. And that's why, again, in this case, having a strategy is really critical to understand where we come from in our plan. So, having a plan as we move forward in anything, especially in recovery, is just critical. I find that a strategy is an excellent thing to put into place. A plan is an excellent thing to put into place because then we just simply work that plan. However, my recovery has taught me to be a lot more flexible. That there's a very fine line between having a plan and having an expectation, because
Mm.
expectations, as I know, are premeditated resentments. So if I have a plan and things don't go to plan, I have to be willing to pivot and to move with that plan. Um, and if things don't go to plan, and I can get frazzled or overwhelmed, that is when I realized I had an expectation. So it's very, very important to have a plan and to work your plan as it relates to your own actions and your own what you can control to your fingertips and toes, right? That's it. But if your plan involves other people doing things or falling into place, or events falling into place to align with your plan, that is a strategy for disappointment.
Hmm.
So let's be very clear about the strategy part here. The strategy or the planning is only for what we can control, and that is us and no one else. There
Hmm.
is not another person on this planet we can control or influence. Truly, it is a waste of time and energy to think that. So it's important for us to remember the strategy applies to us, to our needs, to our goals, and that we work that plan and we have that in place. And that growth in recovery is about being flexible when we're not able to stick to that plan for whatever reason. How about
Yeah,
you, Paige? What's your
I
what's your thoughts here?
I want to just quit. You said something about, things may not always go as planned. And you and I have talked about this before. The power in recovery is plan B.
Mhm.
Just
Exactly.
being able to flex and have a backup plan, because then you can stay calm, and it's not like the wheels come off the bus
That's right.
whenever things don't go your way. So I agree with everything you said. And yeah, as far as me, yes, I'm a huge planner, and I
Mhm.
was thinking about this because I realized that I had kind of naturally started living this strategy through my maturing process even before we created Real Food Recovery. It had just kind of evolved over the years on sound principles and logic. This was basically the way I was living before starting recovery, period. The only difference was I was still using these plant-based sweeteners to make these beautiful chocolate cakes every week, and I was confused why my cravings would just not go away. So my plan or strategy has always been the cornerstones of the Real Food Recovery program, the food prep, sleep, movement, and spirituality. All of those areas are very big parts of just who I am naturally as a person. I probably got tighter in my food prep through recovery, and you'll hear me say it's my number one strategy for success is having my food on hand and ready to go. It's the biggest thing that keeps me personally safe. That's what works for me. I call it convenient fast food, and it brings my brain so much peace and comfort. I never have to worry about what I'm eating next. It's planned out for me, and it works great for my recovery. It's the truest form of self-care and greatest act of love I do for myself every week. And I also add that if I address these core needs of my recovery with the food, sleep, movement, and spirituality, and I'm still having problems or feeling unsettled, then I'm left with this reinsurance that I've covered the basics and it's something bigger. So it helps give me a starting place to look at things a little deeper because I've ruled out these foundational principles. So in other words, I just cover the basics first and see what's left over. I love Jamie's saying of helicoptering up to see what else there is that needs addressing. If I've ruled out the basic stuff, then helicopter up and take a bird's eye view of what else is going on.
Yeah. And now, and now that really does help, right? To think about, okay, is this, as we go up a level, does this strategy support our goals? And
Right.
or does it still support our goals? I've had strategies in recovery that supported my goals for a period of time until they didn't, and I had to re-strategize. I'm in that phase right now, re-strategizing, and it is humbling, but it's also energizing because you're trying new things and figuring out what's going to work for you at this phase.
Right.
So now we're going to take a step back and look at the first step, right? Is in this whole strategy for success, or the whole S's of success, is that's the S of story. So the reason that we start with story is because the beliefs we have, the limiting beliefs, the foundational beliefs, the childhood beliefs, the family of origin beliefs, the beliefs that we've accrued as we age, and the wisdom we accrue, all of those stories, they affect how we look at life, how we execute in life, how we live in relationships, and how we grow through them. And they also inform all of the mistakes that we make and the lessons we learn from those. So I have a very rambunctious puppy right down here.
We can't hear him.
Okay, all right, good. He is playing with a toy voraciously.
Good for him.
Yeah, yes, he's all energy. All right. So, when I think about story, I think about, again, limiting beliefs. For me, that those can really be uh they can throw me off my track quickly. And sometimes they're a story that I don't even realize, or belief that I don't even realize I have. And they can be, if they're negative, they can really take me down a path off of my goal. Or they can take me to a place where I'm like, hey, why am I going in this direction? Because I really don't want to go in that direction. Oh, I have a limiting belief here. So stories can inform us in really positive ways. They can give us huge rocket launching power to get to the goal, or they can take us far away from our goal. It's very important to, when you hear folks say, check your motives, another way of saying that is check your beliefs, check your limiting beliefs. What are you assuming? What are you maybe pulling from the past that worked for you in the past that isn't working for you now? Or is there a story that you can create that you can really tell yourself that, that gets you to the next place? So an example of a really empowering story, could be that, hey, I always hit my goals. I remain nimble and teachable as I get there. I find new ways to track my success along the way. I am really able to navigate uncharted paths. Those are examples of stories, sort of in the affirmation theme, that give us a lot of rocket power to get to where we want to go.
Love
An
that.
example of a story that takes us further away is that I never finish what I start. I always mess something up and can't fix it. I never learn from my mistakes. I keep making the same ones. Those are examples of stories that take us away from our goals and can take us away from success. So it's really, really important that we understand the story, aka the beliefs that we have. And if we have a limiting belief or a story that really takes us off our goals, that we address that first. So again, how we can flip those limiting beliefs or those old assumptions that we have, or it could be adverse childhood event that gave us a fear of some kind. That all can inform a story we have. So how can we flip that script and tell ourselves a different story?
So true. I love that. You're so right on. And it's so vital that Tony likes to say, change your story, change your life. At its most basic levels, these stories that we tell ourselves are, interestingly, they're just attempts to protect us from pain. And one big point to make is oftentimes we get caught in this victimhood and start making excuses for our shortcomings by the stories we tell ourselves.
Mm.
And I love this next point about high achievers don't see themselves as victims. They have that hunger and drive that won't allow anything to get in their way of accomplishing their goals. And I've seen it in so many people. Those successful people, they find a way to solve any problem. And the stories that we tell ourselves can be a huge complement to that process.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I think about, stories that, and so many of us have them. I'm not judging. I've
Natural.
been in this realm too, but stories that evoke self-pity, stories that evoke some kind of you know victimhood of some kind. And even if it's warranted, right? Like really terrible things that can happen to people. I was just listening this morning to a speaker talking about how they treated a patient, it's a doctor treating a patient, who came to him for weight loss support. And she had all of her other metabolic markers checked and all of her other health markers checked. She was in a really good place metabolically, and health wise overall she was in a good place, but she could not figure out why she could not leave the ultra processed foods behind, and she could not stop using food for comfort. And eventually the doctor was able to connect this, right, with the help of a team of a psychologist and this physician that worked with him. Um, Found out that this patient had witnessed her mother's murder at the hands of a stepfather when she was like 6 years old or something. So here this was, this severe adverse childhood experience was, had started this lifelong love affair, right? Or really, dependence upon food. And we were just interviewing, a guest on our podcast yesterday who talked about how his parent was, her source of comfort after the loss of her mom at a very young age was candy given to her by extended family that were
Mhm.
just that were in charge of raising her after losing her mom. And so they just said, hey, you can eat what, I guess a family member owned a candy store and said this little girl can come in and eat all the candy she wants. This
Mhm.
was back probably in the 50s, when they didn't understand how that all connected to weight and obesity. And this young girl developed a raging, sugar addiction, which was then passed on to her offspring. So again, these stories we tell ourselves about how these, not only what life can do to us, what people can do to us, but what the food can do for us, good or bad or otherwise. All of these stories add up. So the stories that we tell ourselves really, that's where the power is. If we're telling ourselves a negative story, that self-pitying story, it really is poisonous to us. So how can we change that story and change that script to flip it around and tell ourselves a more uplifting, positive story? And again, for me, I look at, reframing. I use that tool all the time.
Mhm.
If I, we had over the weekend something silly, but it's a good story. It's a good example. I have this big my mug of water that I carry around everywhere, and I just made the perfect mug of ice water. Like it was nothing, I don't know, it was just water and ice, but it was like the perfect ratio of ice to water. It had sat for like an hour, so it was like the perfect kind of cold. And I was just like, I was in my own head marveling at this mug of ice water. And I'm like, oh, look at it over there. I'm just going to put it right here.
Now I know what to get you for Christmas.
All right. While my husband and I watch, watch, TV on Sunday night. And I was just like, look at my ice water. I'm going to enjoy that ice water in a little bit when I get thirsty again. And then my little pup, who is super sensitive and super attached to what humans think of him, he gets up on the ottoman and knocks over the cup of water by mistake. And the water fell only like a foot and a half, but like the whole thing just exploded
Oh,
everywhere. Water and ice
no.
everywhere, a lot. And so I'm like, oh. So I was disappointed, and of course I had a mess to clean up, and the rug had to be dried out and aired out, the whole thing. And the dog got yelled at for a moment, and I remember thinking, you know what? Thank God it's just water. Like this could have been a real
Right.
mess. If this was a colored liquid, any kind, it could have been a mess.
It wasn't acid.
Exactly. Yeah. It wasn't as, yeah. So, we cleaned it up, and we moved on, but I was very quick to reframe it. And then of course I was also kind of noticing that my little pup was very, very offended that he got yelled at.
Poor guy.
Oh, he was very butthurt all night. Mommy had to spend some extra time with him, telling
I
him,
hope he milked it.
he milked it hard. He milked it. Like the puppy doesn't care. He's like, I'm over it. But the older one, oh, he feels deeply, just like mom. So, Paige, have you ever had that experience where you've reframed something that really made a difference in your recovery?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm going to tell a story about you, actually. This was a big light bulb moment for me around self-talk and the impact of that inner dialogue that makes a big impact on outcomes, like you were just telling of your own story. And so I do not love going out to dinner. Jamie's great at it. I am not good at that. In fact, I dread it. And truth be told, I'm just not very good at it. And I always leave with a bellyache, and I end up eating more than I want. It's richer food than my system is used to. It just is not for me. I know I'm weak in those situations, so I avoid them at all costs. And I really like having control over my food because that's when I feel my best. And I don't like setting myself up to be triggered. Some people are good at that. I'm not strong in that area. So I had some friends come into town and they wanted to take us out for dinner. So first of all, I eat dinner early by 4 o'clock at the latest because frankly, I'm hungry then. And it settles well on my belly because I go to bed 4 or 5 hours later than that. And I'm just right at the perfect point to lay down. So I have a system in place, and I'm old and grumpy, and I do not like flexing out of my rigid patterns. I can see a trend happening as I get older, but honestly, I just hate being set up for regret because I know how this story usually plays out. So I mustered all my strength to go out to dinner for a few hours later than I liked. And I looked at the menu online. I had the plan. I was prepared. So I thought I was prepared. What I did not factor in was these appetizers that everybody else wanted to get, and not one, but two. My anxiety was already through the roof before I got there. And that's when the wheels did come off the bus and I lost my resolve, and I literally plowed right through those. And of course, the rest of the meal went downhill after that. And I left with a whopper of a bellyache like I feared, riddled with regret like I feared, and did not enjoy the experience. So my biggest fears did come true and huge resentments for being set up to even go out in the first place. So I was relaying this whole story to Jamie, this situation, and I was telling her I knew I was going to fail because I'd failed every other time I'd gone out to dinner. And what she said next was a huge game changer for me. She said, listen to your inner dialogue. Look what you're saying to yourself before you've even gotten there. You've already talked yourself into this story that only one outcome is possible. What if you reframe that to, I am calm and relaxed. I will stick to my plan and enjoy the right amount of food while I'm visiting with friends. Guess what? That had never occurred to me. Overwhelm has a sneaky way of telling us these lies that we believe. We have more power than we think to reframe any message slipping into our noggin. We are not victims and we get to choose our stories. That was the biggest mind shift for me is we get to choose these stories and our brain only knows what we tell it. So give up the story that limits you. And by the way, I have done better in those restaurant situations ever since. Not perfect, but much better. I have someone I have worked with lately that every suggestion we offer, there's an excuse as to why they can't do it. So what we were talking about early is that hunger and drive
Mhm.
to attain our goals. I feel like that may be an area that they are lacking and they are wanting to stay in that victimhood more than they're wanting to achieve the goals. So
Yeah.
that
And victimhood can be an affirming place to be, which is what you don't hear a lot of people talk about. You'll hear Tony Robbins talk about it a lot. He'll talk about, people stay stuck in victimhood. And I even had a period of this back in, when I was going through my divorce, feeling, where I was stuck in this place of victimhood and deep hurt, deep pain. Uh, but the victimhood was giving me something. It was
right,
giving me,
secondary gains.
yeah, some kind of validation, some kind
Yeah.
of keeping me safe, I guess, in a way, is keeping me safe from having to actually step out of my comfort zone and do something different, keeping me safe of having to get hurt again. I'm sure those are the two biggest things. And probably also, safe from um, having to be a different person, right? I could just sort of hide under
And
these.
it keeps you safe from having to excel or achieve.
Mm.
You've got an excuse. Well, I can't achieve anything because blah, blah, blah.
Yep, it definitely could. And that wasn't, I was still, it was interesting. I was still achieving in other ways of life, but
Mhm.
around certain interpersonal, I was not. So it's really, really interesting that, there is some validation for being a victim. But it's not validation. It's validation that it's pity from others.
Mhm.
It's pity, it's sympathy,
Mhm.
it's not a healthy, uplifting dynamic in your life.
And it can become addictive.
Absolutely. And when that's all you know, or that's a lot of what you know, or that's how you've been positively dysfunctionally reinforced, that becomes something that you seek. And that's why
Mhm.
when, the people, some of the people we work with that are in this place, Paige and I have, worked with, we can see it, we can see those patterns coming a mile away. And we also know that there's a point that we can work with someone until we can't, right? To get them to take certain steps towards different behaviors or different choices. And at some point or another, we're not able to get them to do anything different. And we have to detach and
Mhm.
as coaches or, as community leaders and say, hey, we're gonna just be over here. When you change your mind, come on over.
Mhm.
So now let's move to the last S, right? In the three S's, and that's state. So this is, again, if you think about the whole idea of story, strategy, state, right? If you have a story and the story is a positive one about you overcoming obstacles and getting to your goal and or achieving that the strategy that you set out, right? And then you have the sort of plan that you work, the strategy that you execute. And then there's the state that you experience. The state that you experience can be related to the story that you tell yourself. It can be related to the way that you execute your strategy. And it can really be that, again, that state, when we think of that word, I like to relate it to the term emotional state. It could be also related to the term energy state. It could be state of mind. It could be state of body. So state can be altered from the story and the strategy that we have. State can also empower us to create a different story and create a new strategy. We can change our state, aka change our emotional, physical, mental state. We can change them in ways that are really powerful, because that when we that feeling, that mindset that we have in our state, that can actually create an energy within us that kind of gives us a new lease on whatever we want to achieve. So again, when I think about a state, how we change our state, there's really basic ways to do that. The first thing could be, if you're sitting and noticing that your energy is dropping, which happens, for me, certainly behind a desk all day, I have to stand up, right? I'll take the next meeting standing up, or I'll put my camera off and I'll get my desk in a standing place, and I'll stand. That's one way to physically change our state, right? To change our energy levels. Another one could be changing our emotional state. So if I, if I'm feeling down for whatever reason, and I am able to identify it and process that emotion, but at some point, feeling down or feeling discouraged is not going to help me. I can acknowledge that I'm feeling that way. I can indulge it for a moment to give myself some compassion and some grace, and to pray for guidance. But that's it, right? I'm not going to stay and spin in it. So that's another way I can change my state, going from a place of disappointment, or going from a place of sadness and moving to a place of hope, moving to a place of peace or acceptance. Those are state changes. Again, going from feeling disappointed to feeling acceptance and hope. That's a totally different energetic change in my body. So when I think about changing state, we think about changing energy.
Mhm.
And you could also take it to another level, right? You can also move up that spectrum. And you can move up towards an even, going from maybe peaceful and hopeful to happy or joyful. And that, again, it can be a choice, right? Based on what you're looking at. Or it can be aligning to a belief you have, a belief that everything turns out for the good no matter what, that you believe in some universal source of love that has your back no matter what. That can take you from a place of peace or just acceptance or just hope to joy, right? When you remember that. So again, that state change uh, is really inside of us.
Mhm.
I love this. There's a man whose name escapes me right now, but I found him on social media, where I find all my good philosophers lately. And he's an 85-year-old clinical psychologist who is here to teach you everything that he taught his clients over 50 years.
Mm.
That's his hook. And the man is incredible. I'm uh riveted every time I scroll and I see his little sweet face. I stop and I'm like, what is he going to teach me today? And his whole thing about this is, he doesn't call it state, but he calls it, you're the boss of you. So you
Mm.
have to you choose your mood. If you're in a bad mood, you can choose a different mood. And
Mhm.
he also says, even before that, before you get to a place where you're in maybe a bummed out mood, he said you can choose your mood the very first thing that you wake up,
Oh,
and you
so
say to yourself,
totally.
this is a good day, or I'm having a good day today, or I'm in a good place today and I'm gonna stay there. And he says this way you're not being batted about by life, so that life chooses your state. You choose your state, you choose your mood, you choose your mental state. And that is critical to successful mental and psychological health. So I love that he reminds people of that. And his whole big phrase is, you're the boss.
I
You're the
love
boss.
that.
So yeah. So Paige, how about you? What do you do for turnaround of state?
Oh, yeah. For me, when I'm at my max with stress, that's when I quickly turn to self-talk and try to put everything back into its proper perspective, because that first immediate is everything is catastrophized. and out of control. And it's just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's look at what the truth is here. So it's a good time for me to question if what I'm thinking is actually really true. It's interesting that Tony says that the last one is actually the most important. You may be surprised to hear that state is the most vital component to success, or you might say state of mind, but staying positive, staying in a positive state of mind is imperative to being successful.
100%. So again, when we think about where our focus goes, our energy flows. So another way of saying that is, if we're focusing on a negative state of mind, or being stressed or overwhelmed, or focused on disappointment over the things that we can't control, the people we can't control, outcomes we don't have impact on, that can take us, when we're focusing on all of those things, where our focus goes, our energy flows.
Yeah.
So our energy is going to flow to a negative place,
Mm-hmm.
which is not going to leave us in a place for enlightenment, right? Or new ideas, or
Good
inspiration,
point.
or hearing God's voice. None of that. We would not get any of that.
Yeah.
So when we think about how we spend our time, where we spend our focus, that can really change everything. Now, the flip side is also true. If we think about, okay, that's why gratitude journals, gratitude work is so important. You know, I'm in a place of transition, and there was a point where I got really, really defeated about a few things health wise, and I had to, look at different changes I need to make, and I was getting in a really defeated place. And I thought, I've got to stop thinking negatively here. I've got to, sit down every morning and write down what I'm doing well. The day before, what I did well, and the day before, what I noticed, how I noticed I felt, and from those choices that I made. And it really was a game changer for me to look at
Mm.
the good, because when I was looking at the good, I was feeling better. And sure enough, where I was focused, my energy followed.
Mm-hmm.
Paige, have you had experience with this?
Yeah, I have to tell on myself here a little bit because I'm a person who can spin out with worry very, very easily. It's a gift. It just comes very naturally to me. And there have been times that I've tried to spill that over onto you, onto Jamie, for those that can't see us. But uh, and I do that because misery loves company, and I need Jamie to be at my equal level of upset and panic that I am, so I can feel much more comfortable about myself. And then she has had the audacity to respond to me with, I'm choosing to have an abundant mindset. And I'm like, huh? What is she even talking about? This is like a total foreign concept to me. Why would she not choose to have the opportunity to be just totally worked up like I am? Because it's so fun to be worked up like that. And then we commiserate about it and talk about. So that was a huge lesson that she taught me in controlling my state of mind, especially when it comes to looking at what we have control over. We often talk about doing our very best and then just allow the chips to fall where they may. In
Mhm.
life, we really can only focus on what we have control over. The rest is just complete wasted energy.
Yeah,
So I'm a work in progress when it comes to worrying, and I do have to give myself a little bit of a break because this is how it shows up with the things that I just really care about and are
yeah,
important to me. I'm not getting worked up over, small things, spilt milk, but the big
right.
things, yeah, I worry about. Just it's how I reflect my level of concern and care. But I do have to do a lot of self-talk to correct my thinking, and it takes me a minute, but I
Mhm.
usually get there at some point through rational conversation with myself. I'll tell a quick story about the significance of state of mind. I know I have told this story on our podcast before, but it really does bear repeating because it is the perfect example of how significant state of mind is, even to the point of saving someone's life. When my husband came down with sepsis a few years ago, when we first got there, the doctor pulled me into the hallway and said, this is a 50-50 chance of survival. I had no idea. I was shocked. And he said, but the one thing that does change it to 60-40 is attitude, or like we're talking about state of mind. That 10% actually has gone down in the history books of saving people's lives. What was really interesting is they said science can't explain it. There's
Mm.
no scientific reason for why that happens, but all we do know is that it does work, and it did work to save my husband's life. And later down the road, after he had had his double amputation on his legs, we were talking to a different doctor about the same statistic, and he said that's completely true. I had two women that gave birth right at the same time, and both lost their legs, and I think each of them might have lost part of an arm. And one lady, she flourished. She had a positive state of mind. In fact, he said she got back doing absolutely everything that she had done before, was a great mother, cared for her baby, and thrived. And the other lady, she was bitter, she was angry, she had a very negative state of mind. And he said to this day, she remains in a wheelchair and just not someone who is enjoying life very much.
Right.
So I can really see where your state of mind makes all the difference between success and failure. It's life changing.
It
I don't
is.
think I'm being too dramatic with that.
No, 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 I agree. So whether you're just starting out or you've been on the journey for a while, remember that change is possible by focusing on a strategy, story, and state you can overcome that whole involvement that you have with food, right? Whether it's trying to resist temptation, whether it's figuring out the food that works for you, whether it's looking at the cravings or obsessions you have around addictive foods, whatever that is, it can get you this, changing your strategy, changing your story, changing your state can get you closer to a healthier, vibrant life. And when we think about taking this journey, it's really looking at it from that first step, not looking at the bigger picture, but just looking right down in front of you, understanding that you have a lot more power than you think over, especially over the processed foods in your life, or how you use them, or how they impact you, or if you use them for ease and comfort. All of that connects here. And you can find out more about what we do around strategy, story, and state when it comes to addictive foods and our compulsions around them, at Real Food Recovery. And you can find us at Real Food Recovery for You, the number 4 and the letter U, realfoodrecoveryforyou.com. So let's jump into listener questions.
Yeah, we've
Paige,
had a
you
few
got
of
one.
those. The first one is, what practical strategies have you found most effective in overcoming your food addiction to processed food? So I touched on this earlier, but I think it bears repeating. For me, I literally always look at the basics first. The four cornerstones are our foundational corners of real food recovery: the food, the sleep, the movement, the spirituality. I personally, I have to address those first, because then I have a springboard in place to launch from there, to know what else I need to look at. And oftentimes I found that when I clear up those areas, it actually resolves issues that no longer become issues for me. So that's why I feel strongly that when we rule out the simple stuff first to see what's actually left over, it gives us a better visual of the story that's going on. I like to think of it as cleaning up the kitchen, then seeing what is actually left over in the house to deal with.
Yes.
That's, do you have anything else to add on that one?
Um,
I didn't know if you had any different thoughts than.
Yeah, I believe that, is sometimes for me, I can get stuck on, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that around my food or my sleep or my movement or my spiritual practice, but it helps me to give myself a lot of grace and to helicopter up a level and look at why I haven't been doing those activities.
Yeah,
So
I love
instead
that.
of punishing myself or talking negatively to myself or judging myself for not having done those things that I know keep me safe, because they do, but sometimes there's situations in life that really impact us in ways that take us away from those daily habits, and it's not a place we want to stay in long term. But if we're there, it's important to look and say, okay, this is why I've taken a sidestep, and this is what I'm going to do about it, to give ourselves some grace instead of just focusing on the minutia. Because if for me, if I just focus on the minutia, I never really heal. I just keep doing minutia, which doesn't really heal me.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's a combination. It's a little bit of both, especially if you've got folks that get on plan, get off plan, get on plan, get off plan. There's usually a bigger
Yes.
overarching theme.
Yes, thank you. And this is why I wanted you to weigh in, because Jamie and I sometimes see things just a little bit different. And I love when we have the opportunity to share that, because some people will identify with what someone says, and someone will identify what the other says. And there's no right or wrong.
Right.
It's just
Exactly.
what, so our point is, this is just what we are finding works for us, and everybody through their experimentation will eventually settle into a pattern that works for them as well.
And that, yes, yeah, exactly. And that pattern could be simple as giving themselves lots of grace and compassion when they are in a sidestep from their recovery journey, and saying, you know what, this doesn't feel good. I mean, I'm stepping out of my natural path that really makes me, feel good and perform the way I want to perform. So I'm going to stop and give myself some grace here, and look in the mirror and figure out why I'm off my path and what I can do differently.
And your point about people that continue are in a pattern of lapsing and binging right now and can't break that cycle. You're right. My idea of looking at the simple stuff first may not be the right place to look at.
We
So
might, yeah, we might need a little compassion, for self-compassion.
yeah,
And it
depends
might
on
be,
where you are in your
yeah,
recovery time.
yeah. And sometimes there's conversations or relationships and other things that need to be talked through, talked over, um, so that that person can feel better about, their energy going back to their recovery. If it's that severe and their energy is kind of taken elsewhere. Yeah, it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So next question is around how do you write your internal dialogue to support your recovery from using addictive foods? Again, that's the whole idea of changing our story and looking at our limiting or false beliefs. One of the best methods that I have ever found. I've used them. I've used it myself. I've had clients use it. I've coached it. I've witnessed it. It's all around the Byron Katie work. It's called The Work with Byron Katie. She is just brilliant at breaking down very simply how to look at a belief you have as false or limiting, and to question the truth of it.
I love
Uh,
that.
and it really just starts very simply with that, is it true question, to some belief or some maybe if you don't even know it's a belief, but it's just a thought you have in your mind, questioning that thought as true or not, and realizing that it usually comes down to a limiting belief that you internalized at some point in your life, and now it's working against you. All of that is just so helpful in moving away from old stories that don't serve us anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, Next one. What techniques do you use to shift your state of mind when you feel tempted by processed food? And has it really impacted your success? And as I've mentioned before, it's so much self-talk, so much. I try to calm myself down by thinking 10 steps down the road. So go into that future self instead of this myopic view right in front of my nose. I really, it's hard. It's hard when cravings to think you're not going to feel good later, but it does take practice. And I don't know, for those of you that can't see the screen, I love this little quick method of where I cradle my hands in my cheeks and my hands, and 3 times I say, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay," and it actually does shift the blood flow for me. And just by the snap of the fingers, it for me it has always worked to break that craving pathway and put a stop sign there. So just it changes the blood flow for me immediately.
Yeah, yeah. Anything bringing us into the present, right? Like that is a
Yes.
perfect way to do it.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and if you have any tricks, feel free to share them.
It really is just the reason that works for you is because you're bringing yourself into the present. You're bringing the blood flow away from the amygdala into the frontal lobe, because we can't actually feel sensory experiences unless we're in our frontal lobe.
Oh,
So the
love that.
pathways in our frontal lobe are getting lit up when you put your, just by
Hands.
how long it takes for your brain to register that your hands are on your cheeks, and that you're
Hmm.
feeling warmth, and that you're talking to yourself in a comforting, compassionate way. That's why that all connects, because you're bringing yourself out of the future or the past, and you're putting yourself in the present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well said.
Anything like that. That's why getting outside in nature, changing your, leaving a room, right? Going from one room to
Mhm.
another, changing your location, all of that works. All of that works.
Yeah.
Um, all right. So what role does physical activity play in maintaining a state that supports your recovery from processed foods? So again, I think about physical activity of all kinds. It brings me into the present, brings
Mhm.
me into my body. It brings me into my, my breath. It brings me into the present moment for all the reasons that I just talked about. And it also, reminds me how to challenge my body, reminds me of how my body works, or where it might need some attention. I'm dealing with a lot of joint and muscular issues that are related to, I think, aging and hormone changes, and a lot of just pain in the mornings or in the evenings that require me to stretch every morning and every night.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely a game changer because I'm being present and I'm spending time focusing on the areas of my body that need attention. So again, it changes that state for me for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. This has been great. I really have enjoyed this episode so much. And of course, like you started out in the beginning talking about Tony Robbins, he is so spot on. He just does a great job and does a lot of good out in the world. So I love his messages. So if you want to find out more about us, again, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we hope to see you back here next time. Thanks, Jamie. So fun. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, guys.